Great. Okay. Hi, David. It's lovely to have you on another podcast, which is a part of the series Grit Meets Growth. So, really excited to have this discussion with you. And yeah, like I'll just dive into it and I'll start with the first question, which is like, wanted to know how did you start into the business coaching as let's say something that for someone to do? Like if someone wants to start, what was your thought process of starting something there?
Well, Manav, firstly, thank you very much for the invitation. I was delighted to receive it and certainly to accept it. Um, I would dearly love to be able to tell you that my entry into the world of business coaching was highly planned, and I'd always thought I would one day be a business coach and so forth. But I can't really tell you that because it was simply as a result of a lifetime in business. And I've had a very eclectic career over the last 35 years. It's taken me through the world of journalism, through the world of politics, through the world of running businesses, both pretty large and small, and in the world of education and youth and leadership development. So when I was considering maybe what the next step in my life journey might be, could it be the golf course or could it be something else? A few people started to ask me questions about leadership, questions about doing business, questions about really how to lead a happy and successful life. And I just fell into the whole business of coaching. So that's how it happened. And I'm rather pleased it happened that way because it's very natural. And as a consequence of being natural, it seems to be very successful.
That's amazing, right? Like that's, I guess, the best sort of a way of going into something. Like once you love where you want to go, and I guess that's the journey then obviously unfolds. Obviously, no one knows how that journey will be when they're starting, but I guess the fun is in the journey itself, like understanding how that will go along,
Yeah.
facing some challenges, solving for them,
Hmm.
and all of that, right? So that's amazing. Uh, One more thing that we were going on through your website and we saw that you follow a 5 steps to freedom sort of a model.
Indeed.
So I just wanted to know a bit more about that so that maybe people who want to understand what freedom can look like can learn from you.
Okay, so freedom really has several aspects to it. Obviously, and this is what we pretty frequently coach in, is financial freedom. But it's only a part of what freedom really is. So, freedom, in my view, is ultimately the freedom of spirit, the freedom to serve, the freedom to care. And in order to do that, you have to move out of what we call, in our model, the chaos phase. People start a business or have an idea about a business, launch something into the marketplace. They may not even know where they think the business is going to end up. That's not that unusual, actually. So it's all pretty chaotic to begin with. And the very first step in the business coaching side of things is to help the young entrepreneur first and foremost understand their purpose, understand why it is that they want to be delivering the service that they are delivering, or the product that they're trying to sell. Why is that? And if the purpose isn't sound, if the purpose isn't beyond their own immediate needs, I mean, we've all got a purpose of, making some money so we can live. But if the purpose of the business isn't beyond their immediate needs, that business isn't going to go very far. So one of the first steps that we always do is we do some work around purpose. We do some work on constructing a longer term plan. Now, it may seem slightly strange to people that one of the first things is to get a long-term plan. Well, oftentimes in the mind, the entrepreneur thinks actually the first thing is to be able to survive next month rather than a long-term plan. But, the old adage is if you don't have a plan, you just literally don't know where you're going. So we construct with them a longer-term plan and try to free up their mind, free up their imagination so that they can formulate for themselves what we call big, hairy, audacious goals, BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goals. And from those big, hairy, audacious goals, you then work back and ask yourself the question, and we do this by means of conversation and dialogue and debate between ourselves. Well, to meet that goal, what are the kinds of things I might think I will need? Now, it's a very interesting process, Manav, because along the way, you discover that actually you're not necessarily, as an entrepreneur, entirely equipped with knowledge and experience to meet those particular needs. Now, for a coach, that's really helpful because that
Oh,
begins to tell you what the coach has to equip you with as an entrepreneur so that
yeah.
you can proceed over the longer term. Now, having got that long-term plan, we narrow it down to an annual action plan. And alongside the annual action plan, a cash flow management plan. And alongside the cash flow management plan, a time management plan, because you can have money in your bank account or you can have a good set of investors, but the thing every entrepreneur is short of is time. So we progressively work with our clients to take them from the chaos phase into a phase of growth. And from that growth, we take a look at the expansion that's possible, how that might be possible, what incentive plan needs to be there for the teams to work together to reach those big, hairy, audacious goals. And then also around all of that, we start to provide the business education that the young person will need so that when it comes to the time of, for example, raising more capital or even going public with their offering, that they've got the skills necessary to be able to do that and they understand what's necessary for that to be achieved. But it's all founded on the why. What's your real purpose in doing this particular enterprise? Get that right, and everything else can flow from there.
That's amazing, right? Like, I guess the purpose, I can understand, right? Like, I obviously don't have that long of an experience as you, but I can definitely relate that purpose is, let's say, the biggest thing. Because if money is the only, let's say, reason for someone starting a business, he can do that for maybe a few years. But in a business, like, one thing is sure that there will be hiccups, there will be uncertainties, and there will be times when, let's say, things are not exactly how they want to. So in those times, if money is the only factor, if someone is looking at, then it's very difficult for that business to sustain, and that person to carry on with that sort of a
Yeah.
thing. So I can understand what you're saying.
And it's worth spending just a little bit more time on the subject of purpose. As I mentioned right at the top of the podcast, I've had a pretty eclectic career. And maybe about 15 years ago, I came to a crossroads. I'd run some pretty big companies. I'd run a couple of smaller companies. I had quite a lot of engagement in the world of young people development and so forth. And I felt that I needed to spend some time on myself to really clarify or re-clarify almost what the purpose of my next phase of my working life would be. And I sat down. Tried to fall still and put the question to my mind and heart. What is the purpose for the next phase of your working life? And I found something really rather extraordinary. I found that that it was very difficult to be still. It was very difficult to be contemplative enough to really take a look at that question. So I said to my wife, look, I want to go to a mountain. I want to go up a mountain. I want to go walking up a mountain. And I want to sit at the top of that mountain and really give myself some reflective time, some contemplative time with this question. Now, God bless her, she said, well, okay, I'll come walking with you. I'm not sure I'm going to sit and contemplate, but you can do that, but I'll come walking with you. And so we took ourselves off to Switzerland, where there's some beautiful mountains. And I spent just about a week every day climbing up a couple of thousand feet, finding a lovely rock and sitting there in the mist with this question. And I found that my purpose formulated for me in the mind. It took a long time to get still enough. And I do know that people would say, well, that does take a lot of time, doesn't it? Yes, but for me, this was a crossroads in life as well as a crossroads in business. And I found that it formulated in a very simple way with a simple sentence, which was that my purpose was to uplift the spirit of everyone I met, particularly those I worked with. And the strange thing about it is when I looked back on my career to date, that had actually been the purpose running through it anyway. And I'd done different things, but the purpose was the same, to uplift people. And that actually brought about a change in what I was doing at that time. At that time, I was running a company working with young graduates in their graduate training that come out of university, entering into the workspace for the first time. And I was working with a lot of them, and big multinational companies were using my services, which was very nice. But because I had the purpose clear, I was able to redefine the courses and the training and the coaching that I was delivering, so that it wasn't just dealing with the financial elements of businesses, and it wasn't just dealing with the, if you like, the technical elements of all the things you need to know about in order to get a successful business. It was dealing with the emotional move or content within the entrepreneur, and learning about finding that out so that they could become extremely clear. Because if you can find that motivation, if you can find that purpose, you've got the daily energy to get up and keep going in the same direction. So oftentimes, so much comes at us as business people. What do we deal with today? Do we deal with this? Do we deal with that? Do we deal with something else? Okay. And you can get so easily swamped, and you can lose your way in the swamp. So that reflective exercise, which was terribly restful, was one of the best holidays I've ever had, actually. That reflective exercise has guided the last, I'd say, about 15 years of my working life. And I hope still guides it today, that I will take on an assignment where I recognize that the person that I'm working with and dealing with is in need of uplift, in need of more energy, greater clarity of purpose, and so forth. And I think these are things actually that pretty much every coach, in one way or another, will intuitively or instinctively know about and try to work with their clients. To me, formulating it was a great relief, and it's kept me on the straight and narrow ever since.
That's great. I guess the complete sort of an experience is a lot enlightening. Like that's amazing, right? Like you went to Switzerland, you went to the hills, and you wanted to contemplate things. Again, right? Like a lot of people really think that's the way, but I don't think that hardly any people do that. People don't really look at, let's say, the previous journey and what's the plan that they have for the next, let's say, 10, 15, or like I don't think the number matters, but like the next phase of their life is what I guess it boils down to. So this is incredible, and like as you mentioned, this has helped you to shape the next 15 and probably the next years as well. So yeah,
E- e-
this is amazing.
Exactly. Um, every successful entrepreneur I know has this quality of knowing something about themselves, something just beyond the physical, just beyond the material. Um, Now, they may need help to be able to formulate that and get it clear for them. Well, a coach can definitely help with that. But they do have to know something about themselves. If they can get to know something about themselves, Manav, they've got the opportunity of really knowing and understanding something about the people that they are doing business with. Um, I read a quote just the other day from that great investor, Warren Buffett. We'll have all heard of him, I'm sure. Um, and
Yeah,
he said that when he looks at businesses, am I going to invest in this business or not? He looks at the levels of customer service, and he looks at the quality of the management, very much the quality of the management, and those two factors together. And if he can see that the inner intention, you could call that purpose as well, that the inner intention of the management is not just to serve a customer well, but to absolutely delight the customer. If he can catch that spark of the desire to delight the customer, then that will convince him, so long as the numbers stack up, of course, that will convince him it's worth investing in that particular company. He doesn't want companies that just do good things. He wants companies that delight their customers. And that's a wonderful lesson. Don't sit back and say, well, we do this well. But do you do it in such a way that really delights the people that you're working with? That's the question a successful businessman has to answer positively. Yes, I do. And that's what I'm going to do every day.
that's so true. And again, right, like it's coming from Warren Buffett, so there are no questions there about the question or about the process in itself. So yeah, that's nice. Cool. Moving on to the next question. So, right, like obviously we talked about a lot of things, including challenges, but let's say if you have to pick the biggest challenge that you would have faced being a business coach, what would that be?
Now, that's a very, very good question. Um, Gosh, the biggest one. The biggest one. Um, I think the biggest challenge is to be able to really meet your client, to really get to understand your client, um, and to do so relatively quickly. Um, Business coaches tend to charge quite a lot of money for their service. I mean, they've had a lot of the very good ones have had a lot of years of experience, and in a sense, the value of their hourly rate is reflected by the amount of experience that they've had. And clients are not necessarily that patient. Um, they're saying, well, okay, you're telling me, I'm telling you all about myself, etc., etc., etc. But when are you going to start to deliver? Okay, but the coach has got to manage those opening conversations to gather the confidence of the client, and to say, being patient here. If we put the foundations in right in the beginning, then we're going to get a lot out at the end, and we're going to get it out quite quickly. So the challenge is to be able to get to know the client pretty quickly, to get to know them or something about them from the inside, to keep them on track and aligned with your process until they begin to see that actually, yes, there's some real value here. Now, one of the things that we've done as a business, to help us through that process, is we offer a guarantee to our clients. We say to them, that if they don't see an increase in the revenues of their business to at least cover the additional cost of having our services in that business after usually it's 30 weeks of coaching, then we will continue to coach them for free until they do. So we put that offering, that guarantee in place right from the beginning. And sometimes I have to say, look, man, you've got a guarantee here. Don't worry about it. Okay. I'm just going to keep coaching you until we get the movement. And it will come. And I have to say, Manav, I don't like working for nothing. And I don't. We've never actually had a client who's called on that guarantee because, blessedly, we've always managed to get the movement. There is a requirement on the client side that goes alongside our guarantee, which is they guarantee, first and foremost, to be very upfront with us, with the situation, to be very upfront with their problems, okay, to be very transparent with us. So we don't like a situation where a client doesn't show us the real numbers, doesn't show us the real figures, doesn't give us access to their dashboard. If they've got one, usually if they don't have one, we get one put in pretty quick. If they're not transparent around that, then they forfeit the right of having our guarantee. But in quite a long career of coaching, we've never actually had to call on that guarantee, or no client has had to call on our guarantee. And I think that just says something about the way in which we go about things and the results that we deliver as a business.
So that's amazing. I guess one of the biggest things that you pointed out, right, which was that understanding the problem. I guess that's obviously really important, and because the type of business that you are in, everyone will be coming with a different problem, right? Like every business or every person will be unique in maybe the way they work, the problem that they'll have. Obviously, there can be similarities, but I think like every scenario is unique in itself and therefore challenging
Mm,
as well.
mm,
So, therefore, like understanding them or understanding their problem to the core is, let's say, the biggest thing.
mm,
So, yeah, I can
yeah.
I can relate to that.
A couple of years ago, we actually had quite a large client, and I found myself in the coaching space with the senior management team, the number one guy, and all of his crew. I was coaching them as a team, and I was coaching them individually as well. And there were quite a few, you would describe them as low-level disputes breaking out, both amongst the team themselves and between the team and their teams. Okay, so I was firefighting with disputes pretty regularly, and I decided to find out much more about the resolution of workplace disputes beyond just what experience had been teaching me. And one of the critical things I learned, and I've applied it very regularly since then, is that it's important to understand and to find out the real interests of a person in a situation, not just the position they are taking. So just to explain that a little bit more, you could have a couple of executives, for example, and the position they take is, I don't believe in spending more on marketing unless it's produced and presented, unless the numbers are showing very positive growth within 3 months. I don't believe that, And the other person will say, well, I don't believe in spending all this kind of money on great big sales conferences, etc. These are their positions, okay? But what are their these are the things that they are holding on to, okay? But what are their interests? Their real interests. Now, both of those kind of characters, their real interests is making sure that there's better bang for the marketing buck, making sure that the company keeps growing according to its budget, etc., etc., etc. And the
So,
critical thing oftentimes with a coach is to step away from those positions and highlight the interests which are common to the team. This helps produce real unity, actually, real sense of togetherness. Now, again, you have to be patient. You have to work through that patiently and so forth. But if you concentrate on interests rather than the positions people adopt, then that unity will come about much more quickly. And, the success or the goal or target or whatever, the objective will be met much more quickly.
so true. For sure. Okay, so that's great. I'll just move on to the next question, which is so like in terms of different channels for revenue for your own business, like what are the, let's say, the top 3 or 4 channels that have been for like in your case, and what sort of a role has BNI played in it? I know that it's been just an year for you in BNI, but like just to understand like the different channels and then what roles did BNI play in that?
Yes, okay. So by channels, I guess you're talking about marketing channels and business development channels and so forth. Is that right?
Yeah, it can be anything, right? Like, let's say in terms of marketing, it can be like, let's say if there are certain channels that you're running ads on, but let's say if you're not doing it on digital means, there are like, let's say offline
Mhm.
ways of generating business,
Yeah.
all of that. Like, that's what I'm doing. But yeah,
Okay. So let me take it in a couple of different ways. The question, a couple of different ways. Okay. Um, I'm from that age doing business where relationships mean everything. So the greatest channel for my existing business and development of existing business and new business is the relationships. So people often ask me, how long do people stay with you as a coach, stroke mentor? Okay. So my maths are not so good, believe it or not, but I met a young man when he was 19, green as whatever, green around the gills. He's now 44, and he is sitting at a top level board position in a FTSE 500 company, and I've coached and mentored him all along the way. So that's a relationship where he has great trust, and I have equal trust in him. So that's kind of beautiful. So relationships is my most valuable channel. Yes, we do some digital marketing for more specialized things, more specialized services that we offer as a coaching business. So I'll come back to that as well. But largely it's through relationships. And you mentioned BNI. BNI is a great place to grow and develop relationships. And if you follow the system, you certainly get to know your fellow BNI members. They grow not only as participants in the BNI events, but as friends and as respected colleagues. But when I also think of channels, I think of again a pretty kind of important and useful tip that I received many years ago, which was that if you take a look at your business and the product or service that you've got, are there other products and services very related to your core which you could offer? And that can open up another channel of business. And that can open up repeat business. And repeat business is easier when you've got good relationships in place. Much easier. Okay. So we've also looked through, pretty much we do this annually. We take a look to say, well, are there things happening within our clients at the moment? And for people who we're talking to about potential new projects, are there things happening where if we were to put on a new service, adapt our existing service, that we could serve them better, we could delight them better, going back to my earlier point, and of course, we could make some more revenue. So, one example we're just facing at the moment, quite a lot of, although I'm London-based, quite a lot of the work we're doing is international. So we have clients in Italy, we have clients in Germany, we have clients in Korea, and so forth. Okay. And not currently, but in the past, we've also had clients in India. And we notice that one of the greatest impediments that these clients trying to do business in the English-speaking world, one of their greatest impediments is their poor quality of business English. And they've learned English at school, and they've had some friends and so on and so forth, but they haven't got a quality of English which is actually sufficient for them to do business with properly. Okay. So we took a look at this, and for our international clients, we've started to offer, for example, courses in business English. It has meant that we've had to get our people here properly qualified with, teaching English as a foreign language, teaching business English in particular. We've put the investment in on all of that. And now an international client who's got some measure of English, wanting to get into an English-speaking marketplace, okay, is able to get the help from us in terms of putting together great business presentations, putting together contracts, negotiating deals, and so forth, because they've got that comfort of really understanding and being able to speak well with their English language. I had a case relatively recently where a client from Eastern Europe who had a wonderful product but wasn't making any progress anywhere. We were able to say to him, I was able to say to him, look, I think you need to invest in the quality of your own written and spoken communication. And if you can do that, because your product is really good, because you know how to sell, you will be able to communicate. You can have a great product, know how to sell, but if you can't communicate that, then you're not going to break through in those export markets, which most people want to do. So these are channels that we've developed, marketing channels, all based on relationships, yes, but also product channels, which give us the chance to get repeat business and to maximize the relationships that we do have financially as well as in other ways.
That's great. That's amazing. Like, I guess the biggest takeaway that I'll take from here is relationship is the biggest channel that you treat for your business, such as a bit unheard of. Like, obviously, I can understand that relationships is everything, but saying that it's the channel for the business is really the right, or let's say, I should say, a very interesting sort of a perspective as well. And I guess a lot of businesses that can inculcate that, they can really, um, like, that's a very interesting one, is what I would say. So that's amazing. But since we're talking about channels, right? Like, do you also do, let's say, digital marketing for your business, like running ads on
We,
various channels? Like, is that something that you do as well?
we do a little, but what we do market are basically short-term courses. So, for example,
Okay.
we have a short-term course in curiously, this will surprise you, discovering your purpose. Okay,
Okay.
it's a
Nice.
6 hour short-term course in discovering your purpose. And it's
Okay.
synchronous learning. In other words, there's a teacher with it following a course rather than asynchronous learning, where it's just sort of some tape moving itself I'm not a great fan of asynchronous learning. I think that the coach or the teacher's quality is really important in communicating. And the way we have this course run, it's a very interactive and interrelationship type course. Now, it's been selling for £250 plus value added tax. Okay, so relatively inexpensive. We think that's a sort of number which people will buy without knowing necessarily too much about the people behind it. Okay. But if we were selling that for £2,500 or £22,500, then our expectation would be that the people who came on the course would know us in one way or another. So there's a point, in my view, where social media marketing works very well, and it's usually a price point. But beyond that price point, it's relationships.
Yeah, makes sense. Mm. I can totally relate to that. Right? Like we are a performance marketing agency. Like running ads is what we do for all of our clients. We work with clients across geographies, and definitely the we call it as the AOV, which is the average order value, is something that's very relevant or very important while uh, let's say we're deciding the complete sort of strategy of selling for a particular business. So I can definitely relate to that. That higher the price, like obviously there has to be a lot of human intervention that has to come in before, let's say, someone opts for a particular product
Mm.
or a service. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's important to know about that, and just to really understand, when you're asking somebody who doesn't know you, put their faith in you by putting their money down. It can't really be too much. They've got to be able to afford to lose it before they'll put it down. And you know,
Okay.
I would love to have a world class brand. I don't have a world class brand. I have a brand that's known in my area. That's certainly so. World class brands can do more than somebody without real brand recognition behind them. But if I can recognize that the person who might buy one of our courses or one of our coaching programs, if I can recognize that they should pay the money that they can afford to lose, as it were, if they came in session one, in fact, in our courses, we always give them the opportunity to get money back after session one, but they don't know that necessarily, or it's not front of their mind before they buy it. If they can afford to lose that money, it makes it a much easier sale. And then, of course, you
Yeah.
get a group of people coming on. You understand them; they get to understand you. You know what their needs are, and then the question's a simple one: would you be delighted if we were to help you do this, or help you grow that, or help you overcome something else? And because they know you by that stage, the chances are they'll say yes, and you can charge them a fee which you would normally charge.
That's true. Okay, great. Since we're talking about channels and since we're talking about digital means, I was also like before the podcast, I also went through your LinkedIn profile and I was seeing that you also post content on LinkedIn. And again, right, like LinkedIn is a great channel, or like I should say that that's the channel where a lot of your audience lies. So, what sort of success have you seen, or how do you treat LinkedIn as a part of your channel, or is that more of your, let's say, way of expressing your thoughts and everything?
Yes, it's a good question. Um, uh, well, I like LinkedIn, and I like contributing to the debates on LinkedIn. And I occasionally find myself responding to the artificially intelligence generated questions on LinkedIn, because I think that adds to the AI quality and so forth. but I regard it much more as a relationship builder than a sales tool. I do get an increasing number of connection requests these days, where the requestor is dead keen to sell me something, and I know that from the beginning, and quite often I just ignore it. If I think that somebody's interesting, got something interesting to say, that their contributions, would add to my understanding, my knowledge, then I'll link with them. But I'm less impressed when somebody tries to sell me direct off LinkedIn. I hope I don't offend anybody listening to this, but the old process of make contact, say how wonderful it is that you're a connection, and then completely forget the person. Yes, it'll happen, of course, with everybody to some extent. But if it's just a ruse for then selling you something, less impressive. But I've got a lot of them. Some particular contacts on LinkedIn whose views I disagree with profoundly, but it's great that we're connecting and sharing our issues and our controversial points of view, because it enhances the wider arguments around. And I think LinkedIn is very, very good for relationships, not for sales.
That's true. Yeah. Again, like one of the things that you mentioned, which is relationship is, let's say, a channel for you. So maybe it's not, let's say, directly for sales, but if it is going to build relationships, it can definitely bring in business as well, is what I can say. Like again, right, like I have been posting on LinkedIn for quite some time, and one of the things that I've seen is after people see your content and after people are able to understand what you do, maybe a bit more in a like I guess it's a better way to put things there because then you're able to explain things in detail and someone who's interested can read through that. And instead of just going directly to them and then saying that, okay, this is what I do, this is just a way of expressing your thoughts. Someone who aligns with that thought can come to you and say that, okay, I want to know more about what you do. And then that is more of an organic sort of a,
Yes.
let's say, not just a sale, but also a relationship
Yeah.
that's being built, right? So that's how I have seen the platform building or growing. So, but yeah, I can understand that there are lots of people that are just trying to sell things. They're not really looking for any sort of a connection building or a
Mm.
relationship building, which obviously takes time and efforts, which is difficult in the fast moving pace for everyone to do. So I can understand that element as well.
Yeah, very good. Very good.
But great. The last sort of a question that I have is like, what is, let's say, an advice that you will have for anyone who is looking to start a business of their own? Obviously, I know that one thing that you mentioned is you have to find your purpose. That definitely something that I'll take, but anything else apart from that as well, which you think that anyone who is looking to start something of their own
Hmm.
should definitely keep in mind or do?
Yes, that's a very good question. It's one I've been asked a lot. And the first piece of advice I always give is make sure, if you're thinking of running a business, make sure you've made your mistakes getting somebody else to pay for them first. In other words, don't jump into business too early. Now, there is a point of being too late. I can come to that in a moment, but certainly don't jump into it too early. I think the ideal time to start a business is late 20s, early 30s. I think that's ideal. You should have had, you've got your degree, you've got your education under your belt. Hopefully, you've had some business education under your belt as well. Why do I say that? Because here in the United Kingdom, 60% of businesses don't make it past 3 years. And of that 60%, the vast majority fail because the entrepreneur has no business experience. Okay. Doesn't understand that businesses go broke because of cash flow rather than not making a profit, for example, to take the simplest of examples. So make sure you have made your mistakes using somebody else's money to do that. That means, you've been employed. We all make mistakes when we're employed. We'll make mistakes when we're self-employed as well, or owning businesses. But let your mistakes be made when somebody else is paying for them. And then when you have got that level of confidence, you've got some knowledge base about you, then look for that product or service which you're passionate about. Now, preferably, it should be unique. It's very hard to find a unique product or service. But what you can always do is to be better than your competitors, maybe cheaper than your competitors, although being cheap is not necessarily always the best thing. But definitely your quality of product services delighting your customers more than your competitors are. And if you can find something like that, then launch it out. So that's the second piece of advice. And the third piece of advice is don't be necessarily too fixed on where you're going to end up. Okay. So I had a business in my early 30s. I've had businesses since then, obviously, but I had a business in my early 30s. I thought I could delight my customers more than my competitors. That proved to be so. So we were quite successful. We built some really good relationships and so forth. But I didn't have an absolutely fixed view of what that business was all about. Now, what this enabled me to do was to open up some new channels, going back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago, of service, new channels of service, which I'd previously not thought of. And it was those new channels of service which actually provided the rocket fuel for the company to really grow. And when we had really grown, and I look back, I thought, I never thought about that at the beginning. It just came. There's a great book I always encourage young people to read. It's called Who Moved My Cheese? And it's all about,
That's amazing.
yeah, you've read that? Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of people have. It's a great book. If you don't read any other book, read that one. It's all about being so awake that you can read the market and know where the market's going almost before it gets there. And if you're fixed in the idea, I am just this kind of business and that's all, then yeah, you'll probably make a living, but you won't get the rocket fuel to make it growing, as it were. So those would be my key pieces of advice. Don't start too early. Make sure you've made your mistakes and so forth. Make sure you're fluid in your approach so that you can go where the market is taking you, and make sure that you are continually delighting your customers. They would be my main pieces of advice.
That's amazing, right? Like I guess someone who can take that as a guide, there's a lot that they can do. And obviously, like I'll definitely add the one that I asked you not to add, which is to find a purpose as well. So those are the let's say key takeaways that you're passing on to anyone who is starting their own business. So these are really amazing. And I guess these are like really something that someone needs to think about. Like it's at the end of the day, business is not, as people say, it's not just a sprint, it's a marathon. So you'll have to be prepared for that. And you'll have to understand all of those aspects before you enter into your business. So that's amazing.
Yeah.
Before we like in the podcast or the session, like there is one thing that we do, which is we ask the person who is on us on the session for a question that we will ask the next guest. So any sort of a question that you would like us to ask the next guest.
How do you manage the unexpected? How do you
That's amazing.
manage the unexpected? I think you'll find some of your guests have some very interesting answers to that.
I definitely think so. So we already have that noted out, and that's the one question that we'll definitely have for the next guest. But before we wrap it up, like any last words that you would want to add?
Well, I'll give
And
my own answer to that particular question because it's a very frequent one. I have an
okay,
I have an
for sure.
I have an inner mantra, I suppose you'd describe it, okay, which is that when things go wrong, which they inevitably do, okay, I ask myself the question: if all of this goes as badly wrong as it possibly could, will the Earth keep turning on its axis tomorrow morning? And if the answer is probably yes, the problem is relative, not absolute. Disasters pass. Pick yourself up and go again.
Nice. That's amazing. But thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for doing this. I definitely think there's a lot that anyone can learn from this. And if there are any questions that anyone will have that I won't be able to answer, I'll definitely pass that along to you through an email or a message. So I'll definitely do that. But this was, I should rather say this was enlightening. At the same time, there were lots of things or lots of perspectives that I haven't at all thought through, which is something that will keep me awake for the next few days. But yeah, thanks a lot for doing
Well,
this.
Manav, congratulations on pulling this podcast together. And I think you've done a great job. And I've been really delighted to make a small contribution to the business growth of your listeners. So thank you.
Thanks a lot for that. I'll just stop the recording. It will just take a minute for it to, let's say, sync in everything and save the data. And once it's done,